Hello and welcome to the MHR podcast. I'm Andy.
And I'm Emma.
Emma, I think it's about time we talked about holidays.
I think it is. Well, I mean, we are dressed for the
It's weird
occasion.
how this has happened, hasn't it? For those who can't see, we're wearing those nice little fluffy necklace things. What do they call them?
To be honest, I'm laughing at you, but I don't actually know.
Well, I've got a big hat. You've got some shades on.
That I can't see out of.
No,
But this
that's
is all
fine.
part of the effect. You're welcome.
I've got you a drink as well. It's just a normal cup of tea, but I put some pineapple in it, so it feels like we're on holiday.
Oh, let me see if I can...
Oh, it's a bit strong.
Oh, some of that pineapple went up my nose, I think.
Yeah, good. Right, anyway, so it's July.
It is.
So it's
coming around
about
quick,
the
isn't it?
time when most people start thinking about taking the holidays. Mm-hmm. And I thought we could start this week by talking about hush holidays.
Hush holidays?
Yeah, do you know what that is?
No, but it sounds like some marketing term.
It's one of those post-pandemic kind of little new trends that have come out,
Okay.
which we ripped apart in a previous episode, but I'm going to play along with this one for the sake of content. So
I like it a lot.
As we know, remote working has kind of came into the picture a lot more through the pandemic and
Yes.
post-pandemic. You know, a lot of people reviewed how aware that they're working for different types of organisations with the possibility to work from Rome. Yeah,
Work from Rome?
not the actual city. Just roaming around, right? So
I see.
people took the opportunity to be like, well, people don't. I don't have to work in a specific location, so I'm going to go and work where I like, right? So where does the line end on there? And what people have started doing is they're working from anywhere they like in the world, because they can, the contracts are remote, and they've started having hush trips or hush holidays.
Okay.
Yeah, this is one of the newest trends or travel trends that have come in 2023. And that's when remote workers, or any workers to be honest, pack up, head somewhere nice for a limited amount of time without telling their employer, right? And then they log in and work as normal, right? Which you can imagine probably comes to some interesting kind of revelations when people aren't as quite honest as where they are, You're only one kind of Zoom or Teams background being removed to reveal you're on actually...
That's a dangerous game you're playing.
Yeah, you're at a board meeting on the beach, right? So a stat here has told me that 56% of UK employees say they're likely to go on a hush trip this year. According to the Evening Standard said that. Yeah, that's a lot. So it's a case where a lot of people feel like they can do it. I think what's interesting about this is that in some organisations they're going to be fine with it. Some people have a unlimited annual leave allowance. So like, you can go where you like, right?
Work from anywhere contracts.
Work
as well.
from anywhere contracts. Some people won't. So if you don't, what's the line? What's the agreement between you and your employer about going? Well, I'm going to go there. I might not tell you because I am still going to work my hours. I am still going to be online, but I'm actually just going to be on a beach in Barcelona.
It's just being mindful of understanding your boundaries, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there's the element that you've just said there about, there are a number of businesses, I think it can be quite industry specific, if I'm honest, that offer unlimited holidays or work from anywhere contracts, very digitised industries. But then it's also having that trust in place as an employer to employee. Yeah. And that's not just your employer, insisting that they trust you, but it's actually trusting yourself that you're going to do the work and work as productively as you should be doing when you're on these trips. For me personally, I think I'd find that really tricky. Yeah. Especially if you're there with family and they're,
I think it is a personal thing. I think honesty is always the best policy. But
Absolutely.
for me personally, if I was to if I had to be away for whatever reason, with family or my partner or whatever, and I was like, I'll try and balance work, I personally wouldn't do that because if I'm not in the right mindset, I'm all or nothing, right? If I'm at work, I want to be at work. Yeah. If I'm on holiday or if I'm away, I want to be away. I don't want to try and balance the two.
You want to be able to switch off from it, don't you?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about having a healthy balance by going, no, this isn't time allocated to thinking about that.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a slippery slope. The last thing you want is to go away, book an actual time off, right? All inclusive, whatever, somewhere, sit by a pool and have thought of your work mobile on you, or of your thought, you know.
Yeah.
And also some companies, especially if you're dealing with lots of sensitive information or data, that's the last thing they want you to be doing. You don't want to
They
be
could be
taking...
picking up IPs as to where you are, and that could be quite a
Exactly.
concerning thing, couldn't it?
Yeah, if you work in quite a tech-savvy organisation, they're going to be able to tell where you are in the world by where you're logging on. So
Yeah.
that's why I think honesty is the best policy. Because if you know, depending on what level you are in the organisation, but if you're telling your boss, "Hey, I'm going to be out the country, but it's not a holiday. I am going to be working." That's fine, but that's not a hush holiday, is it? That's you
No,
going,
that's
I've got to
still
work
being
remotely.
transparent about the fact that
Yeah.
you're going to be working.
If you're like, oh, it's business as usual, my employer doesn't know where I am, but actually I'm going to take 2 weeks in Spain, but actually the first week I'm going to work and not tell anyone, that's a problem. Especially if you log on that morning and someone in like your IT department or cybersecurity goes, why is your IP address saying you've logged in from Madrid? You know what I mean?
It's very difficult to hide your digital footprint these days, isn't it?
Exactly. So
And I wouldn't want to endorse ways in which to avoid it either. of
So
course.
it's obviously up to individual business practice. I think the lessons learned I found from reading these articles about hush holidays is businesses need to make it incredibly clear what their expectations are from employees, when and where they should be working, what's appropriate for the business, and what that is in the contract. And employees should be very aware of what those expectations are, and just frankly be honest, because I think it's a lot easier to be found out if you're not being completely honest to your organisation. And why put yourself in that position?
No, definitely. And I think more importantly for yourself as well, I think the idea of the hush holiday, I think on a personal level, I think blurs that work-life balance concept that you and I both, really try and hammer home as part of these podcasts
100%.
and talking about the importance of that in a business. I think that creates a blurred line that isn't comfortable.
Yeah.
I mean, that people don't like having to work out of hours.
Yeah.
And I think that you have to be able to separate the two.
Yeah.
And, ways in which employees can manage that. There are a number of businesses that offer incentives to purchase additional days, for example. So, if it's an issue of, you're not got enough holiday days to be able to do, careful with your pineapple. You throw me off now. But no, if you don't feel like you have enough holidays to be able to do what you want to do, there are a lot of businesses now that offer an incentive to purchase additional days, likewise to sell them if you're not likely to use your days either. So, and like you said, just having that honest conversation. There's ways in which of managing these things. If it's an unavoidable trip, there's compromises that can be made to make it work. And
but
I just don't
have
like the
that
idea of
conversation. There's processes in place. HR will work with that. Line managers should be well informed. As long as you start a process, you start a conversation to go, look, this isn't part of the norm. I know it might not be in my contract, but I might need to work from a different location for whatever reason for the next week, 2 weeks. I want to raise that to you so we can find the solution. Because the employer doesn't want you to be in a situation where you're unhappy. And the employer wants to make sure you've got everything you need to do your job. So they understand if there's decisions being made. I don't know. But it leads us on to a nice point. So we talk about hush holidays. I think, it's just a fad term, isn't it? Made mostly by marketers.
It is, but I do
us.
Appreciate the alliteration nevertheless.
But holidays in general, I think it's a good time for us to be talking about how businesses manage those. So I was reading a good article here about summer holidays approaching and employees taking their leave. Right? And there's a lot of pitfalls that a lot of businesses and employees can fall into with this. You kind of take it for granted, but you always hear it, don't you? Someone who's like, oh, I haven't taken enough leave yet, or oh, I wish I could carry mine over. And it's all about setting expectations and management of annual leave, right? Because mismanagement of it can actually have a dramatic impact into a business. So I think a good example was shown recently, Ryanair's cancellation of hundreds of flights after it admitted that it messed up the planning of pilots a couple of summers ago.
Yes, of course.
And that's where employers commonly get into annual leave wrong, is because a business runs on what kind of resource you have of your people.
Yeah,
And if
yeah.
your people aren't managed in terms of when they're here or are there, actually it starts to
And if
affect what you
holidays
can
get
deliver.
over-granted,
Yeah.
then it
So,
becomes a problem, doesn't it?
so a few points in an article I was reading was that not encouraging employees to take annual leave across the year is a problem, because then if it's not in the forefront of people's mind or are not planning it properly, it can lead to situations where people are having awkward conversations with their managers because suddenly they want to take a large chunk off and they're not giving enough time.
Really, really common in
Yeah.
December, isn't it, for
Yeah.
people to finish early because
Yeah.
they have holidays they have to take. It's a
Yeah.
use them or lose them
Yeah.
situation.
Maybe at the start or the middle of the year, if things are so busy and we're like, oh, I just want to get over this hill and then I can enjoy my leave. Well, if everyone does that, what are we going to do the second half
Yeah.
of the year?
Yeah.
So employees can feel a lot of pressure to not take leave too early when they feel like they're in an important
Because
project.
of certain busy periods
Yeah.
and that kind of thing.
It's
Definitely.
important for employers to encourage that actually you can balance that earlier on. Typically, the responsibility for monitoring annual leave is allocated to line managers who should periodically check their employees' annual leave and remind them to use it before the end of the year.
Yeah.
So obviously, different companies have different like year ends and stuff, but I do think employees need to have a process in place where they're like, even if it just feels like we're just doing it for the sake of it, are we asking the question of when are you taking leave? Because until your employee comes out, actually, I always had this plan to go away for 2 weeks then, but I didn't tell you about it because I forgot. Suddenly, you're like, well, you've already booked the flight. What can we do now? We're in an awkward
you
conversation
kind of have
situation.
To accept the leave.
Yeah. You've already mentioned another point that this article raised, which is buying or selling annual leave entitlement. A lot of companies do this. I think it's a very good thing to do, where you can kind of buy back time from the company or sell yours. So it gives that extra level of flexibility. I know a lot of companies, we do it as well. We'll give a couple of periods in the year where you can make adjustments to that.
Open that window, yes. Yeah.
A third thing is allowing employees to carry over excessive amounts of holiday. I'm not saying they should do that. I'm saying this is something that businesses struggle with. So
I think that's quite a tricky one to manage and navigate, isn't it? Because you can have teams or individuals that could kind of really exercise that opportunity and create big gaps at other times. So I think if that was to be an option that was that was given, again, there would just need to be some kind of prescriptive rules in place for that. So I think there should, still be limitations on the amount of time you can take off at any one time.
Yeah.
Obviously, if we're going into the conversation of sabbaticals and earned service, that's completely different, and that's another subject. But still kind of maintaining that control if you are to move those days over.
Yeah. So contracts of employment often permit the carryover of holidays into the next holiday year, although they should be capped. They will usually give you a cap of a number of days that can be done. So it's important that rules are imposed requiring excess leave to be used up in the first however many months you wanted you do that for the year. Just so, and again, it simply comes down to how many people do we need to have the business running at the moment. So there's other areas as well, such as allowing too many employees to take leave at the same time, which we've kind of talked about, and not paying employees the right amount during annual leave. You would have thought that's not a complicated one, but apparently in recent years, the single biggest employment law headache for UK employers has revolved around calculation of holiday pay. Did you know that? So employers should now be aware that it is no longer permissible to calculate holiday pay on the basis of an employee's basic pay only. During pay annual leave should now only include other payments such as overtime. Pay during annual leave should now include other payments such as overtime pay, both compulsory and voluntary, commission, standby, call-out allowances, and all these kind of travel allowances. So these things do need to be thought about. Employers need to decide on a sensible approach to holiday pay calculations, right? Particularly the length of time used to calculate the average. So, like within a 12 weeks being popular suggestion, right? And what allowances should be included.
That's a very, very valid point for certain industries that we work with. So think of those that have hourly rate payments, overtime payments. So think of kind of manufacturing, supply chain, logistics, retail, those kind of areas. I know, my husband, for example, is one of them, where his holiday pay can sometimes accrue to being more than his standard pay because of the reflection of his overall pay. And that's a really valid point, because you could be creating a risk of your employees missing out on pay that they would have received if they were at work.
Yeah, that's it.
Because of their entitled holiday time.
So
Very, very valid.
there's some helpful tips here in this article that I was reading. To wrap up in a nutshell, some helpful do's and don'ts for line managers if you want to manage your annual leave. Yeah, do you want to hear some?
Go on.
Okay, so the article says that you should encourage staff to submit dates for their holiday as far in advance as possible.
Yeah.
I suppose there's no harm in doing that as kind of an if, but, and maybe I'm thinking of doing this, because
provisional times.
Yeah.
It helps planning from an internal perspective, and from an employee well-being perspective. It also ensures that your team is planning to take time off, and you're kind of monitoring that and making sure that they're taking the time that they need to
as long as it's
recuperate.
very clear, you've got two different processes here. There's just me telling you that I'm thinking about it, then there's me actually submitting it. If that's two different things, there's no harm there. You can say what you like and you can set expectations, but the actual process is one thing. Review regularly whether or not employees have taken or at least plan to take some of their holiday leave. It should be a bit of a red flag if you've got a certain number of day allowance and someone who's reporting to you hasn't taken any yet, and you're already in like July. Like, okay.
Avoids the risk of getting stung kind of later on in the year, or as we've said already, getting that grumble from that employee that they are going to potentially lose their holidays as a result. Yeah. Very, very important to keep on top of.
Remind employees periodically how much annual leave they have outstanding. So we can talk about this till we're blue in the face, but people management software does support this. If you have a very clear, holiday or annual leave or absence system in place of your people software, you can get a live up-to-date recording to the second of what has been booked / what has been taken.
It makes for the employee, it makes that self-serve process considerably easier, because it automates all of that process for them. They can submit a leave of absence request. They can put in the reason for that leave of absence request as well. The manager will then get notified of that potential absence, and then the manager has a chance to look at that amongst the rest of the team to see how the work can be divvied and whether that can be accepted or not.
That's also something we have, which is really good, is you can see everyone who's in your team, or you can see everyone in your department or your peers, I think as we've called it, and you can see everyone that week who's off. So it's a really good way of lining up, like, what resource do we have in the team versus who's away at the same time. Really helpful when you get things like a lot of bank holidays, which we've seen this year. Typically, a lot of people like to take their leave around bank holidays because you can kind of give it a nice little buffer. Really common thing to do. And suddenly you're like, oh, actually, with those two annual bank holidays coming up, is everyone planning to take the time at the same time? Do we need to look at what process we need to manage that? Because one of the things here was to ensure that planned leave, we have adequate cover for it. It's great that you want to plan to do that, but if everyone's doing it at the same time, how are we going to keep business as usual going? Be proactive with the management of holidays. Don't leave the matter of holiday to chance. Make sure you're aware of what's going on. Don't take the view that it is up to each individual to decide whether they may want to take a holiday. Make sure you're proactively going, look, I'm here to help you with this as well. It's on you to figure out, if you want to talk to me about how you can take your leave or when you think is appropriate, that's a conversation we can start.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to enforce as an employer to, as you say, kind of encourage them to take that leave, and just make them aware of the risks that come with not taking that leave. Yeah.
Because vice versa, what you don't want is also an employee at the end of the year going, I have to take my holiday because I've not taken it yet, but now I'm feeling more anxious because I've got so much I need to do by the end of the year. I'm not going to enjoy my time off because I've got all this coming in, and actually I feel like I'm going to be worried while I'm away, and I'm going to come into a bit of a mess when I get back. Don't wait till the end of the year before reviewing, because otherwise you're just going to have to crush it all into one point. It's a very common problem. And don't give in to employees' requests for pay in lieu of holiday. So that's a lot of so a lot of people will be like, oh, I can use my time in lieu instead. Like make very obviously it's up to each business, but you've got to make it very clear what constitutes as time in lieu versus what is absence for annual leave.
That can also become very blurred
can get very
in terms
blurred.
of how that's
Yeah.
managed. So
Yeah.
just managing those expectations from the front of how time in lieu can be managed versus how general kind of holiday management.
And
is
finally, and
dealt
I
with.
think this is a really strong point to finish on, especially as we often talk about work-life balance being a really healthy thing that we benefit from, is don't make your staff feel guilty about taking holiday. It is an entitlement that we all have.
Absolutely.
Even if it's just something silly, like, sometimes you'll get a joke in the office. It's like, oh, you're going on holiday? How many times have you been on holiday again? It sounds like a fun thing, but some
Yeah.
people can feel like really sensitive about it. It's like,
Especially when you're
Yeah.
working within your entitlement as well.
yeah, it's none of your
Yeah.
business. It's my personal allowance. I'm allowed to do that. I have my own workload. I have my work stresses. The last thing I need is to feel judged because I'm using something I'm perfectly entitled to claim.
And I want my tea with pineapple.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm going away to have a tea with a pineapple for a couple of weeks. I'll be right back. Please leave a message, and I'll get back to you as soon as convenient.
I tell you what, that's got some tang.
Yeah, it's seeped in now.
Andy, it's time for the producer segment.
I've got an email. I don't understand it, but yeah.
Well, I'm going to go first. That
Okay.
is the instruction from Lee with a very sweet compliment. Thank you, producer Lee.
Do you have an
You're my
email from Lee?
favourite too.
I have an
do.
email from Tom. Okay.
Well, I'm better than you.
Okay.
So. Oh, okay. This is a situational thing. So
Okay.
I'm going to ask you a question.
Right.
Okay. So, in your scheduled check-in with Darren, you notice a few things that make you slightly suspicious.
Oh no. Okay.
Darren is drinking Fanta Limon and not lemon.
Oh, Dazza.
Your feelings tell you that Darren is having a hush holiday.
Oh, damn. You
Dazza.
can't buy that can in your local supermarket,
you little
Darren.
monkey.
Why is that in your
You
Zoom
monkey.
Teams shot?
So,
Okay.
I want to know how you would deal with that, okay?
Okay.
So, firstly, do you let him get on with it? He's doing his work, so all is
Okay.
well.
Yeah.
You hate the fact that Darren is drinking Fanta Limon and book a meeting in the office for the first thing tomorrow, knowing he won't be able to make it, so you can fire him.
Oh,
That's
that's
spicy, isn't it?
not my aggressive. I wouldn't go with that tactic usually. I'm not that. Okay.
Or C, report to HR and let them deal with it.
Cowardly. So, right. Me and Darren go way back. So I reckon I'm going to go B, but B on a tangent. I'm going to ask him a question or have a call with him, because I think if it's a solo call, you one-on-one, you can't hide for long. I'm not
No.
going to go straight to HR or fire him, but I'm going to allow him the opportunity to explain to me where he is.
Benefit of the doubt. Hey?
Yeah, and then I'm going to go, you do understand, right, that because maybe there's not an understanding of the process.
Maybe.
So now I'm going to go, because you can't blame someone or go straight to firing them because they don't get that there's a process in place.
Okay. Oh, you're very diplomatic.
Yeah, I'm gonna be
Very
like,
diplomatic response.
Dazza, Dazza,
Dazza.
listen, Dazza, put your hand down, Dazza. It's just me and you on the call. Dazza, put the Fanta Limon down. I've noticed that's very off-brand. Where are you at the moment, Dazza? And he'll go, oh, sorry, Andy, I'm in Tenerife. And I'm like, I know you are, Dazza, because you haven't even got a background on. I can see you're in Tenerife. You do realise, Daz, that we don't. Some hat's going. You do realise, Daz,
slowly going.
that we don't have a kind of a hush kind of holiday work from home contract. You are supposed to be in the office. I thought you were working from home. You're supposed to be in Selby. And he'll go,
That is so specific.
I know, I didn't know that, Andy. I just thought I'm working my hours. I'm like, it's fine that you've worked your hours. I trust you, Daz. But what I don't trust is the deceit now. I'm going to send you a contract. I'm going to remind you to look at your contract. And I'm going to have to report this to HR to let you know that you have broken process. But I'm going to trust that you're going to take this wisdom on. And you won't lie to me again, Dazza. Could you get me a pack of 24 fags from the off duty on the way back?
It's cheaper.
Yeah.
So, I'm afraid you're wrong.
Okay.
It would be very hypocritical of us, given that we are currently filming in Benidorm,
Yeah.
for us to be at all disciplinarians
Yeah.
of this circumstance. Where else could you get a cup of tea with a slice of pineapple?
Okay. So do you want to hear my scenario to you? I've been young Tom has sent me
Really
a
struggling with
scenario.
that.
He said, so firstly, he's signed off his email, Tom, hushing holidays since 1999.
Oh, that's just a demonstrable of his age, isn't
Yeah.
it? And that's just really upsetting.
So here's my scenario to you, Emma. You notice over the course of a week of Teams calls that your colleague Samantha is getting increasingly more red in the face each day.
Oh.
Do you, A, ask her if she's been a bit stressed recently? B, recommend your preferred sun lotion with a high SPF, subtle? C, question whether she's hush holidaying and crack down on it. Crack down was bold.
Crack down. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, firstly, and I'm saying this as a member of the ginger and pale community, I will always recommend a good SPF.
Yeah.
Factor 50 Plus for kids is the best you can get on the market. There are plenty of brands available. I can't be seen promoting them. However, steady on with your hand.
You don't need to see the sun for the sun to see you, you know?
This is true.
Every day
This
is
is
an
true.
SPF day.
This is true. Have you ever heard of moonburn? So I would always go for that first. But secondly, I probably would be asking some questions as to why, her head's getting more progressively red. Is it a rosacea issue?
Yeah.
Is this a health issue I need to be aware of?
Yeah.
Or are you just being a cheeky girl and you're on holidays?
Yeah.
But to be honest, I know the right approach would be to, to query it. But
Yeah.
as a ginger person, I would go for the SPF option.
Okay. There's no right or
very
wrong answer.
mindful.
All I've got on here is that Tom signed off his email sent from my office in the Bahamas. Tom.
Oh. See, mine was... My sign-off was to say that it was sent from my Nokia 8300. A classic. An absolute classic.
Lee's not working from home, is he? He doesn't know where his keys are.
I actually I loved my 3210, actually. I quite missed that. Do you remember Snake?
On that note,
great.
been lovely talking about holidays with you today. I hope you've booked yours in already, and I hope you've made full awareness to your line manager of your plans for the rest of the year, because it will benefit you and them both.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, you've not got any holidays for the rest of the year, have you, Emma?
I actually haven't got anything booked in yet, which is a bit sad.
That's
Have
a
you?
shame. No, we'll be here every week, I'm afraid, to the end of the year.
The
So
end of time.
if you like what we're talking about, remember you can check out all of this year's episodes from every week this year. Find us on mhrglobal.com. See you online
See you there.
in a bit.
Laters.
Macarena, ay, dala tu cuerpo alegría, Macarena.